Have you ever really thought about what you could learn from people who risk absolutely everything for their beliefs? Well, we're about to dive into the story of a man who spent decades traveling behind the Iron Curtain into some of the most dangerous places on Earth. And his goal wasn't just to help persecuted Christians, but to actually sit down and listen to them. So, let's get into what he discovered. This right here. This was the phrase that just grabbed a hold of the author when he was a young man. It's from Brother Andrew, the famous God smuggler. And it's not just some call to adventure, right? It's a total commitment to a mission where, hey, coming back isn't part of the deal. It immediately throws you into a world where faith isn't comfortable, it's costly. And that high-stakes world, yeah, it gets very real very, very fast. Our first story takes us deep behind the Iron Curtain, on a mission that seriously sounds like it's straight out of a spy movie. Okay, so picture this. It's 1987. You're on a flight, heading right into the heart of the Soviet Union. The author is honest. He says he was absolutely terrified. See, as a teenager, he got busted smuggling cigarettes for somebody, and the customs guys saw right through him. But now, this is the real deal. The cargo is way more precious and way more illegal. The instructions they were given were just nerve-wracking, incredibly precise. They had to be at the second lamppost on a specific street in Kyiv at exactly 6:10 p.m. A man would walk up, whisper a password, and they'd just follow him. Then, inside this little tea shop with two policemen literally feet away, they had to silently swap identical-looking bags. Mission accomplished. Hopefully. The risk was just immense. And this quote, it just shows you the creativity and the level of risk they were dealing with. These smuggling operations used specially modified vehicles, RVs, cars, even huge 25-ton trucks with Bibles hidden inside the chassis. For the author and his wife, their little VW van was so jammed full of Bibles that they literally slept on top of them. This wasn't just about smuggling something illegal. It was about reintroducing a forbidden truth into a world that had tried to completely stamp it out. But you see, bringing in the Bibles, that was only the start of the journey. The real mind-blowing revelation, the one that changed his entire perspective, didn't come from the danger he was facing. It came from the wisdom he found in the people he met. To even meet this man, the author had to be smuggled himself, hidden on the floor of a car. The man's name was Trajan Dors. He was a spiritual giant in Romania, a leader of this huge revival movement inside the Orthodox Church. He'd already spent 17 years in prison. And when they finally met him, he was just sitting on his bed in his pajamas, looking frail and under house arrest. The author was just floored. He asked Doris, "Shouldn't you just stop? Let someone else take over." But Dors, with this little twinkle in his eye, explained how he used his official medical trips as the perfect cover to go minister to believers all across the country. And it was right there, in that moment, that the author had this huge realization. He wasn't there to help these people, he was there to learn from them. This is the big idea that Dors shared with him. He saw his own suffering not as some tragedy that he had to avoid, but as an essential ingredient, like leaven or yeast in bread. That leaven has to die for the dough to rise. In the exact same way, he believed his suffering was a necessary sacrifice that brought life and incredible growth to the church. Now, at first, this sounded kind of like heresy to the author. Wasn't Jesus' sacrifice enough? But then he remembered this verse from the Apostle Paul. Paul wasn't saying Jesus' death was incomplete. No, he was describing a spiritual law. The salvation that was won on the cross is transmitted through the cross. If you truly identify with Jesus, the world is going to react to you the same way it reacted to him. Okay, so if suffering is a part of this story, what's actually driving the persecution that causes it? Well, the author came up with this brilliant framework to explain it, and it's based on the 3 trials Jesus himself went through. So let's break this down. First up is the religious tribunal. Think of the Sanhedrin. It accuses Christians of blasphemy, basically saying God has no son. This is like religious nationalism, where there's just no room for any other faith. Second, you've got the totalitarian tribunal. Think Herod. This one basically says, I am God. Here, any loyalty to a higher power is a direct threat to the dictator or the cartel boss. And finally, there's the secular tribunal. Think Pontius Pilate, who cynically asked, what is truth? This tribunal's message is, there is no God. From this point of view, any claim to absolute truth is seen as intolerant and a threat to society. So the key takeaway here is that persecution isn't random. It comes from worldviews that simply cannot stand Christianity's core claims. So when you're faced with these tribunals, with that kind of intense hostility, what's the response? I mean, you'd expect anger, right? Resistance? A cry for justice? But what the author found was something so much more powerful. It was almost supernatural. This story is just staggering. Sister Lolani's husband was a pastor, and he was shot. As she was rushing him to the hospital, with him literally dying in her arms, her very first instinct was to pray for the forgiveness of his killers. Her sister told her later that was the exact moment he passed away. Then there's this story from India. A missionary, Graham Staines, and his two little boys, 10 and 8 years old, were trapped in their car and burned alive by a mob. And his widow Gladys, she got up and publicly forgave the murderers. Her hope was that this act of love might somehow, some way, reach them. It's a response that just completely defies logic and our natural instinct for revenge. And the impact of an act like that can be absolutely massive. When Suzanne Guesquet's husband was brutally murdered in Turkey, her public forgiveness stunned the entire nation. A Turkish columnist wrote this, basically admitting that this radical act of grace said something more profound than any sermon ever could. You see, this isn't weakness. It's a weapon that actually disarms hate. So all of this, it all builds to one final, really crucial takeaway. After hearing these incredible stories, what does it all mean for us, living our lives where the stakes often seem so much lower? The author brings it all back to this really powerful image from his own life. Remember when he had to hide on the floor of that car to go meet Trajan doors? He realized that we all face that same exact choice every single day. We can keep our faith hidden, curled up on the floor of the car, private, out of sight, just to avoid any conflict or inconvenience. Or we can let it be visible. We can let Jesus sit up in the driver's seat and direct our lives, even if it means we might be heading into conflict with the world around us. And that right there is the question this whole thing leaves us with. It's not about politics or where you live. It's about priority and control. All the lessons from these incredibly courageous men and women, it all boils down to this one simple, piercing question. So, who's in your driver's seat? That's a question worth thinking about.